the new local news. We're going to be taking a look at some of the different strategies people are taking to launch new news websites and bring out news content with quality journalism. We've got a great panel here, a mix of business and editorial. Our moderator is Elizabeth Oster, and we also have Chris Genuine from Patch, Ann Doe from Spot.us, or Spot.us, John Biskin from the Startup Angel, and then Leslie Perstein-Rojas from Multi-American, which is NPR's local blog in Southern California.
So we'll take off, okay? Well, thank you all for coming, and I hope that so maybe more people come in since the break. Most of the sessions ran late before. First of all, because this is we have a lot of panelists and a limited amount of time, I want to let you know that we'll break for questions about 10 minutes before the end of the session. And the other thing is I'd just like to ask you folks out in the audience for a minute what you're most interested in getting out of this panel, because we can direct these guys with considerable expertise a lot of ways, but really you're the consumer and we want to meet your needs. So anybody have any hot topics and local news they want to put forward before we start?
Maybe doing press releases for projects that are in a small, like we're trying to do educational concerts, and we're trying to figure out ways how to emphasize that.
Okay, so how to work with, and that's really how to work with, how these guys work with local organizations to get their message out?
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else in the back?
I'd like to hear your thoughts on aggregation versus original content.
Okay. Anybody else?
How to integrate being a content provider with the source to host the conversations amongst your consumers.
Okay, so the combination of content and conversation, so community. Anybody else? That's a pretty good start, but anybody else want to set the stage? Yeah.
I'd love to just hear speculation on where it all is going.
Okay, well, it's nothing easier than to predict where things are going to go at a conference, because no one ever goes back to check what anybody says. 18 years, I know that. So, anyway, let's start off on this. What I'd like to do is say that we have a great panel and that we have a variety of experience and a variety of organizations. And I wanted to start by giving each of our panelists about 5 minutes to talk about their a second or two on what their job is and how they got there, and then 4 minutes or so on what their organization does and how they see fitting into the new news local ecosystem. And so I'll start out with Chris Genuine from Patch.
Well, it's great to be here, great to talk with aspiring entrepreneurs and hopefully the new category of entrepreneurial journalists, which is really what Patch is trying to do. Patch is now a network of hyperlocal websites across the United States. We're relatively new. The first Patch sites debuted in February 2009. We now have 70 in Southern California and over 800 across the United States. The most recent one, Camp Pendleton and Oceanside together in San Diego County. We were a startup acquired by AOL. We now have AOL's resources to help fuel our expansion and our growth. And Elizabeth mentioned how does one get to something like this. I've known Elizabeth for 15 years or so, and she knows my track record. But I've been in new media, mostly startups within big companies for now 20 years, over 20 years. And what's interesting is how much the media world has changed. The old certainties of large newspapers and TV stations and TV networks has totally been blown away by the internet. And the real strength now is in coming up with new ideas, new ways to reach out. Somebody mentioned community. Community has become vitally important, and community is diametrically opposed to the way traditional media ran. In traditional media, you had a newsroom, you had Brahmin editors who handed down the truth. Now it's all about community. And what we're trying to do in Patch is build local communities. Our model is to have a professional journalist, typically with a year or two minimum experience, but we have some very experienced journalists with over 20 years, in some cases over 30 years. What they're doing is they're building a community starting with professional journalism, but encouraging local bloggers, hiring local freelance writers, encouraging conversations and discussions. We're very open to any kinds of ideas from the community. Somebody mentioned public relations. We love getting press releases. In fact, they don't need to be press releases. They can be a phone call and even a kind of a half-baked idea about what you want to promote, and we'll take it from there because we're looking to get very focused and very local in our coverage. One of the things I hope you'll never hear from a patch editor is, I'm too busy to take a press release, or I'm too busy to take a call, or I think you'll find most patch editors will be incredibly welcoming new ideas. If you've got a new company talking about it, doing a business story. Let me end by saying that we're continuing to grow. You'll see more patch sites. How many of you have been to a patch site at this point? We got 3 here. That's good. If we don't have a patch specifically, we do have a Century City patch. I guess that's probably the closest to this area. Your hometowns, where you're from, may have patches, and if you're interested more in patch, please see me afterwards as well.
Chris? Ann?
Hi, thanks for being here, everyone. We work for writers, and we represent you, or anybody who has a hyper-local story that they want to pitch. The way our website works is journalists come to us with a specific idea. We screen the ideas and evaluate whether it's worth pursuing, and then we attach a dollar value to it. So a story could range anywhere from $200 to $5,000, depending on the complexity of the story, the amount of investigation that it would take, the amount of time it would take, and the professional experience of the writer or journalist. It doesn't have to be just print. We work with multimedia. And we post the idea on our site, and we open it up to our community of members. Membership is free, and they look through the menu of story ideas and see which one they would like to fund the reporting of. And they make a donation in any amount. And then they get a tax deduction in return because we're a classified nonprofit. And how it works is, say a story is worth $1,000. The maximum amount of donation you could put toward it is 20% of the story cost. And we do that because of ethics. We don't want a single individual or organization or company to be able to influence the coverage. We put a cap on it. And then what we do behind the scenes is we work to help you with the reporting, we help you with sourcing, and we help you place the story. Whether it's on a TV station, a radio station, a newspaper, online, whatever. And as we try to find different partners that might be interested in the topic, the slant, the coverage, whatever. And so the total amount money raised belongs to you, the journalist. We don't take a cut of it. So basically we're your agent, but we don't, we don't take 10% or anything. The reason we were started is because of all the budget cuts in newsrooms all across America, and this is a new model for covering hyper-local stories and covering issues that may otherwise be ignored. And it's worked out pretty well for us. More than 90% of the story pitches that we post online are actually fully funded. And every story has a deadline for funding. So 2 weeks before the deadline, if say you're lower, you haven't even reached 50% of the fundraising goal, then we give you, the journalist, the choice of whether to move ahead or not. There's all of those elements in place. But basically, it's a model that started 3.5 years ago in the Bay Area, and then it's funded by the Knight Foundation, and it was so well received that we got funding to replicate that in Southern California. And we were getting ideas from all around the nation, and we had to turn them down because initially we only focused on California, and now we were able to go national last summer. So if you haven't heard of us or tried us before, take a look. It's just spot.us.
Can I quickly ask about how many stories have you funded over the last 3.5 years?
More than 120.
That's terrific. And any high points that you want to just point out first on the content
Yeah,
side?
we've worked with anybody from just, a recent college graduate to Pulitzer Prize winners. And we've had stories from college interns that may earn them, $200 per story, to investigations that take 8 or 9 months and earn up to $10,000.
Okay, Gian, you've
Yes.
got an interesting, because you're sort of a B2B publication.
So the Startup Angel, we
we work with tech startups, so early stage tech startups, so tech company including like web-based software, mobile apps, and we only work with early stage. That means that somebody has to be pre-Series A. So once you got institutional funding, we don't work with those people, and it has to be public beta or post-launch. So you know, if it's just an idea or you're still private alpha testing, that kind of thing, we don't work with those yet. So once you get to that stage that we target, we interview them and provide exposure and also provide introduction to angel investor or VC for them to help raise money and also help them connect with other entrepreneurs. So the thing with early stage startup is, you know, like once they got funded by big investor like some sort of VC, usually everyone wanted to write about them, they get a lot of exposure, but when it's very much earlier on, like they really need exposure at that time, nobody wanted to talk to them, and that's where we come in, because we can recognize that ambition, and at that point in time, it's just like, you know, just a team and their dream and whatever that is.
And so you started out as an online publication that told the stories of these startups, and then you sort of moved your business into working with them in more hands-on ways. So you were first an amplifier, sort of a marketer in publication.
Exactly, and I mean, we started out mostly just LA based, and also covering some like tech startup event, and then now it's become a bit bigger just LA.
That's terrific. And so really then you've gone from sort of a media play to a community play and expanding your services. And Leslie?
Yes, hi, I am Leslie Gerstein-Rojas, and I am the editor, curator, writer, and generally the host of the Multi-American blog for KPCC, which is kind of, I should describe it as a startup within a bigger company. It's part of NPR's Argo network, and is anybody familiar with it? The blog or Argo?
You.
Okay, all right, this is your chance. Argo is it's 12 blogs at member stations around the country that were seeded by Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And the idea is part of NPR's drive to go multi-platform to build a much greater online presence, which it has been doing. And what happened is 12 stations were selected and everybody got a topic-specific website. So for example, you know, KALW in San Francisco has a Cops and Courts blog. Multi-American is an immigration blog, immigration and the immigrant experience, pretty much. So it's kind of a mix of not just immigration news, laws, and policy, but you know, language, psychology, through the generations in Southern California. We also, you know, for example, in Oregon, there's an environment blog. The Seattle blog covers global health. So everyone's got something that kind of relates to their region. In San Diego, there's a blog that covers the military home post. And so in Los Angeles, I run this particular one. And so it's interesting because being a startup within, Argo is a startup within NPR, and my role has been basically to build this blog from the ground up, pretty much. So we have a mix of content, and you mentioned something between original content and aggregation. There's a blend. There's a blend between the two. So we do aggregate news stories, and you know, sometimes, for example, one of the great things about being part of this network is that some of the blogs have related content, so we do some cross-posting. WAMU has a blog in Washington, D.C. that deals with race and class called Decentric, and we coordinate quite a bit. I also work together with the folks in San Francisco that do The Informant, which is the crime and cops and courts, because we deal with immigration policy quite a bit. So there's that's one of the advantages of it. But here in Los Angeles, you know, somebody else mentioned talking about what was it? Content and conversation. And that's been part of the idea here. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the shows that the KPCC does, and Pat Morrison and Larry Mantle, but there's something about radio and about public radio where there's this relationship between the hosts and the audience. And that's what we're trying to recreate online. And there are skeptics that say you can't recreate that connection, that connection online. But I'm finding differently, actually. One of the great things about this platform is that you can incorporate what people have to say into posts. Sometimes we've had, for example, some posts that have generated so much reaction, and some really thoughtful reaction, that I'll take some of those conversations that are going on with the audience and I'll reincorporate that into content. And it just creates more feedback and more community. So we actually have been increasing our monthly visitors quite a bit, so it seems to be working. But that said, it's an interesting model. It's something that's still a work in progress.
Great. I'd love to just draw out the community in conversation bit a little bit, hear some of the other people have to say about it. And really, one of the things I think is most interesting is just how a local media venture both reaches out to its community and connects with them through the content they do and their activities in the community. And then also, what are the sort of, what's the sort of the economy of participation, the rewards and incentives that people see for participating? So if somebody's going to participate in Spot Us, I mean, they get the reward of seeing the story actually produced, or, you know, just kind of, what's the motivation?
Part of the motivation is seeing issues that you feel are undercovered or completely ignored brought to light. One way in which we promote participation is when you click on a story assignment, there are requests sometimes for tips from community members or just the audience members. And sometimes the journalists will say, would you like to join me and take some photos for this story, or, you know, help me source some of the issues. And so there's an exchange. Whatever you email about the story to the writer or the reporter, it's posted online. We're all about transparency. So all the dollar values of donations are posted along with an avatar or, you know, the person's name. It can be whatever you like. The average donation that we get is $20. And our whole idea is not to sway people to donate huge amounts of money, but to get as many people to donate to a particular story as we can.
So the community that a contributor gets is they get to hear about the progress of the story, they get to
Yes.
continually be informed.
And the journalist blogs during the reporting process.
Okay.
So then there's an exchange of information, and we're very open to your ideas or concerns. We always try to respond.
So
Yeah, I was just going to add, it's not so much about a dollar value reward that these people in the community
Sure.
get. They are passionate about something,
Right.
whatever that is. Like for me, the tech community, they're passionate about the tech, about entrepreneurship. So the reward is they feel that they're part of it, and as a host, you have to nurture these fans, because they, you know, those one fan mean that there's going to be a stream of other people that are going to follow that one fan. They're going to help spreading the word. And I agree with Leslie, like that connection between that you have to be a part of that community, like you do have that interaction. And I mean, with the media, like with the digital media now, there's so many ways that people can get engaged with your content, right? You know, through the either comments or maybe through Twitter interaction or Facebook. There's so many ways that they can be, and they feel rewarded by you, like responding to it and then being a part of that conversation.
You know, community is really the new currency in today's online world, and that's really at the heart of what Patch is trying to do, is become a center for communities across the country. Take a place like Hermosa Beach. The editor there is always out talking to people, working out of coffee shops. All of our editors have their pictures on the home page at the top, contact information. And what that does is, when it's that personal, you encourage comments, you encourage people to send in story ideas, to write about issues. We've just launched local community blogs that are open to anyone. And the idea there is whether you're a solar power advocate or someone very focused on local government finances, or a business person, or someone who has a brand new restaurant, whatever you want to write about, we're open to that kind of information. So we've got the professional journalism, but we're also very much encouraging the community, both online and also in person, offline as well.
I'll add to that. I mean, I think that traditionally, and you know, Chris and I used to work together. We come from a newspaper background, and people have just been accustomed to, you know, the news is kind of sent out at them pretty much, and they consume it, and that's kind of the end of it. If they want to, they can send a letter to the editor, post a comment underneath, but there isn't a whole lot of interaction in that traditional model, and that's what we've been trying to change pretty much. And what appealed to me about this blog in particular, and I've been an immigration reporter for years, is that again, it was sort of, the news was about these other people that, you know, others were sort of reading about these other people. This blog is written as much for, you know, as much about its audience, for its audience, as it is, you know, about it. So we're looking at this second, third generation audience, and these are the people that are creating this community and that are writing in about their own experiences. And it's very rewarding for them for them to see that their voices are actually really being heard and people are actually kind of speaking to them. So that's part of the community building that's going on. It's rewarding.
One of the things that we see in many of the conversations about local and online media, the question that came from the audience was sort of the world of aggregation and curation versus original content production and sort of organizing an operation. What is your percentage of both? How does it work? All you folks are really sort of beacons of original content development, I think, and really doing that. But I'd like to, and certainly Anne with Spot Us, I mean, you're creating a marketplace to fund original investigations and reporting. But you're all in the business. I'd like to try to talk a little bit about the role of aggregation, curation, a little bit. So.
Sure. So, for example, one of the startups that I'm helping, they're actually based out of India. It's called Viewsline. They're an aggregation of video content. One of the things that I noticed is they have their search engine rankings really high, but when it comes to trying to look into monetize that traffic, it's much harder than actually original content for some reason. Because the click-through somehow is a poorer quality of traffic. I'm not saying that's the general, but just based on this website, this is what I noticed.
Yeah, there's different business implications to curated content that you don't host rather than content that you do produce and can monetize. So absolutely good point. Anyone else?
I think it's very important to have both. You've got to have your own content. In other words, you can't exist entirely on one or the other. You have to have some kind of combination. It's probably 50-50 in Patch. A lot of our content, we will link out to others. We'll write a story that says, hey, this local publication had a wonderful story about someone. You can read it at this link. We'll do that very often. Our local blogs are an example of that curation of content. We have directory listings of every business in our communities, and that's really curation as well. Once we create the directory, we invite the business to claim it and add more information. And while that's very different than the traditional media world of, say, 20, 30 years ago, I think it fits with this notion of community.
Yeah, I really think content, like everyone says, is king, and part of what we try to do is to get that content spread widely, as widely as possible. So what I was telling you earlier, that we try to place the stories, we'll contact editors or news producers, whoever runs the media organization that we're targeting to. And we've been very lucky to have our content from journalists placed in, recently we had our first story in the LA Times last week. We've had Orange County Register, La Opinion, KPCC, the area, local stations, and we also go national and international. We had a 6-month investigation on the Pacific garbage patch with the reporter on the boat in the Pacific Ocean that was printed in the New York Times Science section. And we also work with a lot of weeklies, alternative publications, radio stations. The whole idea is we want to share the content. If a media organization wants exclusivity for the content, then they're asked to donate a small price toward the production of the story, and that dollar value goes to the journalist producing it.
In terms of the mix, as Chris was saying, it's a mix. I don't know if it's 50-50 or not, but we try to do, actually, especially now I'm hiring freelancers, we're trying to do a good deal of original content, but when we do cross-post, for example, from a sister blog, or a highlight of post that's just really interesting. One of the value adds is that we get to put it in context. So for example, just I had a report out the other day about minority population growth. And Decentric, took it, but then they kind of put it in context in DC, which of course DC is interesting. I didn't know this, but DC has actually had more non-minority white population growth than anything else. So they kind of juxtapose it against what's going on there. So there's always a good way to, even when you're aggregating content, to put it in perspective for your audience, and that's one thing that we do. So.
One of the wonderful things that just sort of emerged out of the conversation here is one of the things that I found that coming from old school journalism myself and seeing how wonderful a world it was when you owned the printing press, you owned the trucks, and you knew where all the doorsteps were that you were going to put that publication on, and when you owned 6 p.m. and you knew the program. It's very, very complicated now, which is there's a lot of startups, but there's a great dependency on distribution. So how do you get distributed, and how do you get audience, and how do you do partnerships? So a lot of entrepreneurs I've talked with in journalism, and these guys speak to it over the years, are, you know, they're doing the content and the curation and the packaging they know so well, but all of a sudden they're de facto sort of doing business development, trying to figure out how to seek distribution. So a little bit more of anything about that. I think, Anne, you've already spoken about, but anybody else on partners that you work with, and how you seek to amplify yourself through working with others?
Well, one of the things that we do at Patch, we work closely with local universities. We've been working with UCLA, among others, in the LA area. And we have journalism students who participate, who contribute. That's one very important partnership. We encourage local organizations, institutions to send us story ideas, to comment on our stories. That's another way. But one of the things that we've really focused on in Patch is this idea of entrepreneurial journalism, where the editor is really in charge of his or her site. Certainly there are guidelines to follow, but the editor is getting up every morning and thinking, well, how do I promote this site? How do I get buzz in the community? Who do I talk to about it? So, and they often make some spectacular decisions. In Lemon Grove in San Diego, the editor did a contest yesterday where you had to pick the cross street of a photograph you saw, and then you get a Starbucks card. We do stuff like that all the time, where it's, and it's, you know, it's not like buying TV advertising or Google search words on a large scale. It's very focused and local, but if you get one local resident who says, wow, that was great, that person's going to tell 3 or 4 others, and it's that community growth aspect.
So word of mouth marketing really comes from, and promotions built into your regular content programming. So anybody else?
Well, for example, like Chris was talking earlier about, you know, community. It's very important to have all these partners because there's all these stakeholders. And for us, we're working in the tech community. So you know, there's VC, there's angel investor. Like TechForce Angel is one of our partners. Different VC, then also like local places like say Co-op, which is a co-working space for tech community. We are a media sponsor for this conference. You know, we're always working with different people. You have to. There's no other way around it. Yeah.
And Leslie, talk a little bit about the sort of cross promotion that you have with NPR on-air programming and so forth in terms of helping raise your visibility. How does that work?
Well, as it turns out, I'm going to have to run out of here because actually I'm rewriting a post into something for NPR this weekend.
Okay.
That's a really wonderful thing to have that kind of promotion. It works in a whole bunch of different ways. You know, we do, you know, every now and then we'll do a two-way, you know, for example, you know, before the recent, you know, May Day Immigration March, you know, just kind of a two-way on one of the shows, sort of talking about, you know, what's changed in the 5 years since these marches became really closely aligned with immigration, since May 1st became almost a part symbolic of it. But anyway, that's actually a very small part of it, though, because we actually don't do as much on air as one might think.
Yeah.
Most of it is really, it's online, and that's what we focus on. One of the great things about the way that it's set up, though, is that we can decide which story goes national or not. So if you look at one of the sites, and they all more or less look the same, there's a column to the right side that has NPR Argo highlights.
Okay.
So you can actually look at the highlights from each blog everywhere around the country, and that helps build traffic, too. You know, with the home site, and actually, you know, took a while to work out the technical glitches. I think each station kind of was at its own pace. But if you look at the KPCC home site now, actually you'll see there's a section on blogs. And I'm not the only one. I mean, some of the show hosts have their own blogs, you know,
Sure.
but if you look, there's a scrolling box of blogs. So we get some exposure that way. You can click on it. But I can't overstate the importance of social media.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's where we really promote, you know, and that's where you really just have to, you know, you're kind of on your own. I mean, you really help build that out. I mean, you know, we have, everybody has an auto feed, you know, the station has an auto, you know, Twitter feed, but you tweet it yourself and you know, direct message it to the right people and you build a really good community online, you know, of your Twitter and Facebook is where you build in, because you have lots of blogs that kind of cover similar things. You have journalists that cover similar things, and you help each other promote your stuff. We retweet our things, and I can't stress that enough. That's just been really critical.
And just as editors and proprietors of these sites, let's talk a little bit about how much time you spend in analytics and how much that comes into your decision systems a little bit. You know, one of the things I think is remarkable, if anybody's here about online publication, if you have Google Analytics, there's lots of things to look at, but there's basically one pie chart that you can't get your head away from, which is how much traffic do I get from search, how much traffic do I get directly, and how much traffic do I get from referrals. And as editors, how do you think about those three pieces of the pie in terms of optimizing your audience? Or you don't have to think about those pieces of the pie because you get to be editors who don't look at analytics too.
I do look at
Which is fine.
I do. You know, the elements vary. I mean, you know, there have been months when it's mostly coming from Facebook. There have been months when it's mostly coming from NPR.
Okay.
And lately, you know, as we've had more of a presence on the homepage, I see more coming from the homepage.
Uh-huh.
So, but it actually really varies.
Right.
You know, so it depends on the month. I mean, whenever, for example, it's getting inside baseball, but
We like that.
on the NPR.org site, there's on the top right corner, there's a rotator box. And on the weekends, it's very tough to get a spot in that rotator box because at first I was kind of the only blog that was pitching and seeing that now all the blogs are pitching. And then of course we're in competition with the NPR blogs, like, you know, the music blogs and everything. So it's not like we get in every week, but this one that I'm doing, I'm hoping to get into the rotator box. Once that happens, if it happens on a weekend, on a Sunday, and you have a story in that box, it just basically turns a fire hose on it.
Right.
You just get tons of traffic on that one piece. And so that's one of the things that, you know, whenever that happens, then you'll see that that's where my referrals are coming from, and it'll stay that way for the next week pretty much.
Well, Patch is very numbers driven. We get lots of data and we're always looking at it. And it really helps coverage. I remember, and Leslie, you will remember this, back in the days of print newspapers, you never knew who was reading your articles, you never knew what was popular, what wasn't. Now you do, and it really helps you decide what you're going to cover, how you're going to cover it, and who you're going to reach out to.
We have our founder who founded the site when he was 25 years old, 3 years ago, and he tracks all the analytics. But another way that we can measure what's effective and what people are into is through the donations. We see which stories get funded faster and funded fully more often. And we also use Facebook and Twitter a great deal. We are using social media to help fundraise in another way, which is instead of accepting advertising banners, we create special custom surveys for our potential sponsors. And when you log onto the site as a member, you have an option of taking a survey. They're usually like 4 or 5 questions. And there's no junk mail that you'll get in return. And you'll get a dollar value that's a story credit that you'll apply to the story of your choice. And that's one way in which we're trying to promote sustainability, because we know the grant funding will run out while we compete for other new grants.
Let's talk a little bit on the local side. This may not, this may be more specifically to Patch, but I'm really interested in the relationship between local commerce and local community in terms of working with local businesses. Sometimes I ask myself, you know, what came first, the ad or the editorial? You know, the chicken or the egg? I don't really know, but there's a lot of effort to do local community content, and where's the line with the candy store on the corner in terms of their stores?
That's a great question. It's in Patch, it's very clearly been the content first and the advertising second. We have local advertising sales teams. We sell both local advertising and national advertising. You'll see a mix on all of our sites. But our view of this, and I've been through a number of startups where we focused first on advertising and second on content. Patch is focused first on content, and we believe the advertising will follow. We do offer a business directory to every business and entity in the city. So for example, schools, churches, nonprofits, but also every restaurant, every retail store. And they're not just a basic one line, it's a full page with up to typically five photographs. We have teams that go out and take the photographs. And then we invite businesses to claim these and add further information. Now, we certainly sell advertising, we sell enhanced directory listings, but for someone who may be a future entrepreneur, maybe starting a business, we really look at covering the business community as an important part of community coverage. Not because a business might buy advertising, but because it's interesting to read. So, for example, in Carlsbad, we had a story about a startup that makes this, iPod headphones that the cord zips up so that it doesn't get tangled. We love stories like that about local entrepreneurs coming up with new ideas.
So, anybody else on that? Or?
No, I agree. Like you can't just follow the money. You have to follow whatever that you're trying to build, and then the money will follow. Because yeah, exactly. It just doesn't make sense.
I want to turn to the audience in a minute, but a couple of sort of wrap-up questions. I want to hear, somebody wanted to hear some speculation, but I'd like to throw one last question to the panelists, which is, how are you measuring success for what you're doing? What are your benchmarks? What goals are you trying to achieve? I know we're talking about content and creativity, and I think there's a lot of belief in this room that works, but also you're also talking about new businesses where people are looking at them, and so what are some of the things that you look to measure your success? And that doesn't mean red light, green light, go or no go, but just on a daily basis. So maybe Anne?
In addition from the numbers I talked about earlier, we also want to see stories produce something that's really powerful or effective or less wasteful for the different local communities. We had a senior reporter do an 8-month investigation into the UC Regents and the conflict of interest. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a regent. Dianne Feinstein's husband. All these people that some are really in the limelight, some are not so. And looking at their business contracts and the money that they earn. And that story really had a lot of effect in Sacramento. We try to do local things. Even we're partnering with Patch in Culver City, looking into the oil drilling issues and why that hasn't been resolved over numerous decades, and all the health problems that have evolved for residents living there. And we want, the county board of supervisors to take a look at that sort of thing. We really try to measure the personal impact as well as the financial.
Since I live in Culver City and I walk by the oil wells every day with my dog, I would like to say thank you. And I think they're just cool. I didn't think they were killing me, so thank you.
For us, it's not just a number. It's not just about how many startups actually get funded through us or how many startups that we interview, but it's so whatever that we put on the site or whatever that we do to introduce to the investor is a very censored, very watered down version of what the startup are willing to share with us. Right. So they come to us and they tell us a lot more than there's some startup here smiling because they're telling me a lot more than what they know, they trust that we would be able to not share that kind of information. So the reward for us to be able to help them overcome these struggle that they share with us, and then at the end of the tunnel you can see that okay, they overcome that maybe the rest of the world doesn't know this difficulty that they're facing.
Leslie?
We have a few different benchmarks. I mean, it's a pretty new site. It's been around for about 8 months. So, of course, traffic is something that we really look at, and traffic is doing well. It's okay. But also looking at interaction, and that was one of the things that we really set out to do. And so we're looking at the way that that's been built and how much community interaction is being built there, how many voices are we hearing, and we're getting a lot of that too, so that's been helpful. And at the same time, we also want to have, part of the station's commitment, of course, is to local journalism, to building community within Los Angeles. So we have, I don't know if anybody's been to the station, but we have the Crawford Family Forum, where we host town hall meetings. And I've been becoming more involved in those too, sort of trying to draw my audience, which is in many ways different from the on-air audience. I mean, there's a combination, but it's a different crowd, trying to draw them as well into the town halls, just about things that matter to the community that I'm reaching out to. And of course, one benchmark is going to be, we're always looking for sponsors. No, I mean, it's grant seeded, but eventually, it's going to be funded the same way that we fund everything else, which is going to be largely donor funded. So.
And one of the things that we see, I think, for those of us who are really long in the tooth with this business for years now, you see the measures change over the years. I mean, social media metrics, how much shares and how many follows and things like that, they're completely new. So value creation and value management is something that's always in flux based on innovation and also just new business models. So I hope you all sharpen your pencils with a few questions. I want to go down the line. I think I'll start with Actually, I'll start with John, if you want to just sort of say, the local media market is complicated. Any speculations about where things are going to go in the next 12 months? Or
So yeah, so I think that question about where things going, whether it's local or not, one thing about content is that it's moving a lot more into video, but we can actually see that almost every day. So video is really a big trend.
Okay. Anybody others?
I'd say it's local. Local community is probably the biggest area of opportunity right now. It is an area that traditional local media had always focused on, newspapers and TV, but with the internet, the ability to have news go two ways, to have conversations, to build communities, that's where I think the real opportunity is going to be.
Yeah, I think we've been really obsessed with hyperlocal, and one way in order to get our message out and our distribution channels out is, of course, we're looking for sponsorship, and so we're thinking of getting, into an advertising network and getting sales reps to go out and sell space or the surveys on our site to fund local reporting.
Leslie, any crystal ball
Predictions?
predictions?
Building on what Chris just mentioned, I do think that community building and that sort of back and forth interaction is really a big driver and something that we're striving for. The ways, because a couple here have talked about hyperlocal, and we do things a little bit differently because we have a mix of national and local with the site. But even bringing in the national content, you can help drive conversations and build community around that. Case in point, we had, this happened in France. They banned the burqa, they banned the full face veil in France. And one thing we were curious about is just, what Muslim women were saying about here in Southern California. So we actually did some Q&As with 3 prominent female leaders in California, Muslim leaders who talked about this. And this just, it just did gangbusters. Everybody had something to say about it. And it was interesting because the comments were coming from all over the place, but you had a lot locally, and you had you have people who read the site, Washington and everywhere else too. So, but you can build community locally, and you can build that back and forth interaction around anything that you choose, really, even if it's something of national interest.
Well, let's turn it to the audience. Are there any questions brewing out there? Yes.
So actually, before you
sorry.
start,
I'm sorry.
there's a question earlier from here about the getting exposure, and I just wanted to address that. Sure, if that's okay. So he was asking about how to get exposure because you guys are a startup or something. So one thing I would say is there's a bit of homework that you really need to do. You need to understand the kind of publication that out there that would be interested in your kind of business or whatever that you wanted to promote. Because it would be a waste of time to send your press release or whatever to a place that you know that they never publish that. So do a bit of homework, but also another thing is people driven. So you have to try to build relationship with those people. Like it's direct people to people. It's not so much a website. There's a person behind that. So
You feel like you've got some information?
Oh,
I can help you out?
definitely, yeah.
Terrific. Up there, yeah.
I got a question for Chris. Do you see Patch.com in competition with, say, local newspapers like San Jose, Mercury's, Oakland Tribune, these kind of medium, local regional newspapers?
That's a great question, and I get that a lot. We didn't start out in looking at specific competitors. We thought there was an unmet need in the market, and that was for professionally driven, community-focused local websites. And we see what we're doing as something separate from what a local newspaper, local TV station, or even a local blog does. We're building the community. We're writing very specific stories about community events. We're inviting community members to blog and to comment. So we're really not taking the place of a Los Angeles Times that covers the whole community, or a Mercury News that covers all of Silicon Valley. Nor are we taking the place of a local blog, which is very, maybe opinion focused and has a point of view. So yeah, we're not trying to compete. We're really trying to build a new segment of the market.
If I could ask you, Chris, so you've been in San Diego for at least 10 years, I think, working on local sites for the Tribune, and then I forget what the other one was.
San Diego News Network.
San Diego News Network. Just because of that experience, is one of the differentiators for Patch, do you think eventually, although it's this hyper-local slice of a community with its content attributes, you talk a little about the scale of Patch and how that might contribute to the success of the sum of the parts?
It's a very big project. To have over 800 websites across the country, and if you go to Patch.com, you'll see a map of the United States. click on the state, you'll see a list of the cities. You'll see the word new in many cases because we're continuing to launch websites. So we do have scale, and you will see national advertising on our sites. And I worked for a long time in the newspaper industry, as did Elizabeth, as did Leslie. And we had great sites, but they were only one community, and it was very difficult to get scale beyond that one community. So I think scale is an important part of this.
Yeah.
I have a question for Chris. I know that in your space, content is king, but you were recently purchased by AOL, where cash is also king, and so there has to be a profitability model here. So are you, with your background, did you get the data points that going after this local market in the way that you are you seeing like higher advertising dollars, or are there other business models that you're thinking you can go after by building that community, which makes that play super valuable?
We're an advertising business right now. Our revenue is all advertising based, and I can't go into the numbers, but so far we've hit or exceeded all of our targets. We offer some very targeted local advertising, something that would appeal to a very local restaurant, but also to a national restaurant chain.
So then, just a follow-up question: do you go out and you have a big sales force that sells that with?
We have both local and national sales forces.
Okay. Interesting.
For each, maybe there's something to be learned about the composite of sort of when you start up a community. As a community started with a journalist, but maybe a region has started with an ad sales force. What's the sort of staffing? Is that?
Well, we start with journalists, and then we add the sales force.
We've got a sales force. Yeah, in the back.
The question is really for anybody who has something to say about it. How are you guys using location-based services, and if so, can you shed some light as to how you're doing that? Certainly, stories have places of origination, and they evolve, right? So far, most of the discussion has been observer-centric, right? Not location-centric.
Mm-hmm.
So is there any? I mean, it's a different way of thinking, but are any of you doing this right now?
Patch is integrated with AOL's MapQuest, so every story we can pinpoint locations to it, and we can have multiple locations. So if it's an auto accident, we'll pinpoint the location. If it is a person being interviewed in a specific place, we'll pinpoint the location.
So the entity that's doing that correlation is an analyst, or is it observer?
It is the local editor. So you wouldn't pinpoint a location in a case where to do so would be inappropriate or create a danger. Let's say you're interviewing someone who's the victim of a crime, you probably wouldn't pinpoint the location. Sure. But there are many other cases where you would want to pinpoint that.
Right, there's a fine line.
You do see other sort of more data-driven, location-based experiences, like Outside In or Every Block or something, when you're putting in an address, or if you're on a phone, it knows where you is and it can tell you what's happening around you. I think those are a little, that's another kind of media experience that I think if you want to look into the future, how does a curated, edited local media experience stand up to just an algorithm saying what's happening around you now, what happened yesterday, and all those things. And those are other products I think that entrepreneurs are thinking of too. In the back.
Hey, I have a question about audience and sort of who you're reaching and who you're not reaching. And kind of anecdotally, a lot of the people in my social circle who I think are fairly engaged, civically engaged people, younger people, have no problem logging in with Foursquare and checking, doing those kinds of local things. But I haven't seen any of them ever even pick up an LA Times, let alone a Mar Vista Patch. I mean, for whatever reason, local news content doesn't capture them. And so is that just anecdotal, or are you seeing that in your audience data? And if so, what are you doing to kind of engage that group of people?
Well, there are a lot of people in Patch who are devoted Foursquare users. I'll tell you that much. I think it varies from community to community. Many of the communities that we're in are, you know, they're more sort of family-centric. We're just beginning to go into some very, some more, you know, some younger communities with a higher percentage of unmarried people. And I think, you know, I think as we do that, you'll see different kinds of content. But let's pick a place like Hermosa Beach. So let's face it, we're going to be reaching the content's going to be much more focused on people who are homeowners, who, you know, are more traditional residents.
One of the things we encourage our journalists to do is to engage in the fundraising or the story building process. So we ask them to tweet it out, like there's a new community survey up, and please share your opinion, take this 5-minute survey and fun stories. And so they're putting that on their Facebook pages and linking to their circles through that. The Spot Us here in Southern California, we partner with the USC Annenberg School of Journalism. So we engage a lot with students on the ground. All of our interns are from that particular school. And we also take projects and analysis into the classrooms. So hopefully they will spread, you know, just word about the site to their own, you know, friends and family.
So for us, like the audience is the tech startup entrepreneurs in LA. Like a lot of the time when we cover events in LA, or if we organize event in LA, or covering somebody in LA, it's natural. Like they're already here, they're interested. So
you know, and I consider myself lucky here because I'm actually not tied by geographic boundaries. So you know, but yeah, you know, one of the ways in which I try to build that audience is, again, social media is, you know, it's a very big part of this demographic, and that's one thing that I work with very much is using social media. But also using, trying to reach a younger demographic, which is one of the things that we set out to do, which seems to be working from the people that are sending in comments, is, you know, these are topics that are going to be of interest, you know, from everything from, you know, interracial dating to food to, you know, language experiences that you had growing up, you know, to, I mean, anything like that that's going to be appealing to that audience. And you can give it an LS bent. I mean, I'll tell you what I'm doing this weekend. I'm doing the guide to the guide to the Latin American warehouse grocery store. You know? You know, we actually started this series of informal guides last month. You know, so we're actually kind of going, you know, by ethnicity. We started with Super King, which is the Armenian American warehouse grocery store. Then we moved on to Superior in Superior in Bell. So it's a local store, you know, but this is going to appeal to people beyond LA, of course. So yeah.
I think one of the things you get when you hear actually through all the noise about the businesses, you hear that, you know, wonderful stories and great content still resonates with an audience. And that is a terrific story, and we all want to read it. Some of the challenges, I think, is understanding the sort of supply chain of getting an audience, and how do you, you know, we say content is king, and it is, because it's the thing that informs and engages us and delights us. But unfortunately, there are new dependencies between distribution and audience, and sometimes I don't know, I think we don't have a content problem, I think we have an audience problem, and that's, I think, where the entrepreneurial opportunities really are, is to connect the two. Any last questions as we sort of roll to the end of this? Yeah.
I had a question for Leslie. I've launched a cycling publishing company last year, which sounds like a great idea that's perhaps 50 years too late. But part of it was with the aspiration of that being the core content nugget, and staying 2-3 steps ahead of everybody online with video and integrated social. And I'm wondering how you balance that tied to the core content that gets you there with either pressure or need to or inability to monetize the next step in where you see the brand going. Do you feel that sort of pressure with where you're at? And if so, is it more than just sponsorships to try to get you there?
You know, we would feel that pressure. Right now, we're still building audience, and I would say that's probably been more of the pressure. Actually, is balancing the content and building audience. You know, sometimes you have to have, because it's part of a news network. One of the things that I'm able to do, you know, is I'm very closely in tune with, of course, what's happening, you know, worldwide that is affecting my audience and affecting my content. So, you know, within hours of the announcement that, you know, Osama bin Laden had been killed, I was putting something together on the immigration policy connection that really did gangbusters because we had it out like right away the very next morning, you know. You kind of always have to sort of, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but just, you know, you do have to sort of keep in mind the content that's going to be driving that audience, which is eventually, I guess in your case, going to be monetizing the site, you know. But then you know, you mix it up. I don't know. Just yesterday I had something on, you know, how I don't know, how does it work? How was I going to? How Spanish baby names are being influenced by the English language, which is not really going to monetize anything, but it's interesting. So you just have to strike that balance. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank the panelists. You guys did a terrific job. So.